Now we move to our last presenter of this part of the session on urban heritage of Maghreb, diversity, inclusion of marginalized communities. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Giamila Quattrone, who is a lecturer in architecture at the University of Liverpool in the UK and HSS faculty lead of digital heritage subtheme. Dr. Quattrone is interested in traditional Arabian and North African architecture. He's founding member and project coordinator at Archiam. And in her presentation, she'll focus on Hamid Oasis in Morocco and southern Morocco, a project that I came to learn about last year when I visited the University of Liverpool, was greeted by Dr. Giamila and her colleagues. So Dr. Giamila, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Majdi. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I would like, first of all, to thank all conference organizers for so kindly inviting me today to present my work in South Morocco, which sits at the intersection between heritage preservation, local sustainable development, and community empowerment. I will tell you very briefly who we are and what we do at Archiam. Archiam is an interdisciplinary research center with expertise in architecture, archaeology, ethnography, and social history, which Professor Shomen Bandopade and I established back in 2012, precisely at Nottingham-Trent University. So today it's double pleasure and honor for me to be part of such an important event organized and hosted by this institution. Operating in countries as much geographically as culturally distant, such as Morocco, Qatar, Oman, and India, our work in heritage spans from documentation, visualization and interpretation, to inventorization, mapping, and analysis, from planning, restoration, and development to digital archiving, capacity building, awareness raising, and dissemination. Supported by the Baraka Trust, as well as the University of Liverpool, in February 2019, Archiam teamed up with Cinetecture, a Liverpool-based moving images production company, and with Terracidia, a Spanish NGO active in South Moroccan heritage preservation, to carry out the project restoring, recording, and inventorying the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the Mohammed Oasis. As you can see from this satellite picture, Mohammed is the very last oasis of the Dra River Valley, literally sitting on the fringes of the Sahara, at the closest point situated about 22 kilometers from the Morocco-Algeria border. We chose Ksar Ouled Youssef as our project site. This is one of the 11 traditional fortified earthen settlements, which, as you know, are Berber essentially in nature, scattered across the oasis, which we generally refer to as Sur in Arabic and Igerman in Tamazight, which is the language of the Berber people. Our aim was to contribute to the preservation of the rich cultural heritage of the oasis by promoting it as a model for local sustainable development and community empowerment, particularly of young people and women, raising awareness of the historical, geographical, and cultural importance of this place, as well as its current struggle for survival, and building local and international capacity. Our objectives were, in the first place, to restore a building of relevance to the community, and in the process provide training and employment opportunities for locals, to record key tangible heritage assets and endangered material culture, to record and inventory key intangible heritage assets and associated endangered material knowledge systems, to record the threats and challenges that the oasis and its people are currently daily confronted with, and to record community perceptions, requirements, and aspirations, which we systematically did throughout the workshops through a number of interviews with various local stakeholders. The field data were analyzed off-site, so once back to the UK, and developed into two main dissemination outputs: an award-winning and international acclaimed documentary film, which was filmed, edited, directed, and produced by Monica Kirk of Cinetecture, which we are very proud of because it has received, since it was launched in November 2019, tremendous recognition and appreciation, and a popular dissemination book, which was released in hard copy format last April, both available online, open access on Vimeo and Issuu respectively. But why this project, and most importantly, why Mohammed? The cultural heritage of Mohammed has become extremely vulnerable under the combined threat of a number of natural and anthropic factors: sand dunes encroachment and desertification, shortage of water supply from the Ouarzazate Dam, which sits further north, unsustainable farming practices that are incredibly intensive and water demanding, myopic planning strategies that prioritize Western-style gridiron new towns, such as, for example, New Mohammed, over the preservation of traditional settlements within the oasis, lack of basic infrastructural provisions such as running water and sanitation, irreversible physical, economic, and social-cultural change, and last but not least, rampant unemployment have all coalesced here, triggering out-migration in search for better life opportunities. But while oasis agriculture strives to survive amid dune encroachment and water shortage, the Ksur, which are actually the quintessential embodiment of Berber traditional sedentary way of life, are deserted, relentlessly dilapidate, and eventually disappear under the sand. But of course, in danger of disappearing is also the wealth of social-cultural practices and traditions that are integral to that very way of life. Regrettably, the Ksur of Mohammed have not yet received the attention we believe they deserve, despite richness in living heritage, an important past as a stopover for caravans traveling through the desert along what used to be one of the major trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean, and the strategic proximity to the great expanse of the Erg-Shegaga dunes, where currently most tourists just head straight on their 4x4 wheel drive excursions, completely bypassing the Ksur. As part of the project, we ran a 10-day long hands-on workshop on the site of the Marabut of Sidi Abdellah Khalifa, the burial place of a man held in great respect locally. Here we trained 20 international participants, really from all over the world, in documentation and restoration of traditional South Moroccan earthen architecture. Local master builders taught them how to make mud bricks, how to build rammed earth walls, mix, execute, and apply mud finishings, as well as tadellakt. Local youth took also part in the restoration, thus having the unique opportunity to learn their ancestors' building techniques directly from the masters. And behind the scenes, the women of the village prepared plentiful medfona, a traditional Berber stuffed flatbread, also locally known as Berber pizza, and plentiful tea for us to have during our daily fieldwork breaks. And I would like to mention here that throughout the workshop, throughout its duration, builders, apprentices, and women were all paid for their work. The significance of Ksar Oulad Youssef lies in its offering a complete panorama of traditional pre-Saharan habitats. The settlement, as you can see from this map, is a compact agglomeration of courtyard dwellings. Its main thoroughfare runs north-south, connecting the two gates. Here you see the north gate, here is the south gate. And obviously allowing a movement along the main direction and route. But narrow secondary streets and alleys branch off the thoroughfare, allowing movement across the settlement and providing access crosswise to the houses. Two open spaces are found by the gates. A9, which you see here, is located immediately off the north gate's covered passage, whereas the other one, a much larger open space, D1, is located by the mosque, which sits in the southeast corner of the Ksar. These spaces were traditionally used as souks to host the caravan trade. Also here, traders, foreigners, and travelers were permitted to stay overnight, protected behind the settlement's perimeter walls, but also separated and removed from the residential areas. Regrettably, the old mosque was demolished towards the end of 2019 and replaced by a modern concrete mosque, which is the one you see here at 7. The Marabout over here is situated amid the palm tree groves immediately northwest of Ksarul Ed Youssef, and actually also shared with the neighboring village of Mohammed al-Islam, which used to be the capital in the past of these oases. On this slide, you see pictures of the two gates, both built in mud bricks. The south gate, which you see here, bottom right, as the typical dogleg layout that was meant to afford defense, but at the same time conceal the settlement's interior. Its outer facade is decorated with small square and slit-like openings and stacked finials. The north gate, which, as you can see from this picture, lay entirely derelict when we were there, gives access to the settlement from the gardens and the Marabout side and leads into a covered passage, this one, which is articulated, structured into 7 bays, rhythmically organized by these pillars sticking out of the side walls. Here you see on the left-hand side a picture of the thoroughfare, and on the right-hand side pictures of secondary passages and overhead rooms, straddling those, which provide pockets of shade at regular intervals along the transit routes. Houses are mostly on 2 stories with rooftop terraces and follow the typical courtyard plan organization. Rooms are arranged around a small courtyard that provides natural light and air, and are accessed from the column gallery around it. Courtyard and gallery are used for food preparation and cooking, which traditionally takes place in a corner on earth pits and ovens called kosher, as you can see in the top middle photograph. But they are also used for food consumption. The dark rooms on the perimeter of the houses are used for storage, being completely dark, while the rooms on the first floor are used for living and sleeping. The courtyard walls are the most accomplished architecturally, with plays of solids and voids, recesses, protruding bricks, and L-shaped pillars, which combined together and with coarsely plastered wall surfaces amplify the textural effect of light and shadow. The Marabout of Sidi Abdel Khalifa is an architecturally remarkable cuboid structure with solid walls perforated only by slit-like vents. Accessed by a deep porch with columns, its interior is organized into a central core that houses the tomb of the Marabout, as you can see in the top right photograph, and is delimited by 4 L-shaped pillars and an arched circulation gallery around. Noteworthy are the 5 corbelled mud brick domes on scrinches. But Ouled Youssef enjoys also an extremely rich intangible heritage that comprises living traditions, arts, and crafts. Amongst these are certainly gastronomic traditions such as bread making, couscous, tagine, and tea preparation. Basketry, embroidery, and rug weaving are the main women's crafts. Women palm front baskets and plates, black cotton head coverings, wool and cotton rugs share the same Berber decorative vocabulary of brightly colored elemental geometric forms, which are endlessly combined, but also combined with stylized palm trees and flowers, typically symbolizing fertility and prosperity. The folk music and dance of the Mohammed oasis originate from both Berber and Arab traditions. Singing and dancing are performed in groups, often accompanied by drumming and clapping, like in Rokba. A chanted oral poetry, which is called Rasma, is also still practiced in the traditional way. And in fact, we managed to have a demonstration from local poets, oral poets, and we managed to film it so that it forms part of our documentary film. Moving on to building crafts, which were clearly the focus of our documentation efforts, we should say that while earth is ubiquitously used in construction, different techniques are employed for different building purposes. Walls are made of rammed earth by successively ramming layers of moistened earth inside temporary wooden formworks, whereas discrete architectural features such as columns, domes, and decorative elements for which rammed earth is unsuitable are built with mud bricks molded out of soil mixed with straw. Wall surfaces are rendered to afford protection against water erosion, mainly. Inside, sometimes they are coated in tadelakt, a traditional Moroccan lime, which makes them water resistant. Since the tadelakt technique requires expert skills and is particularly time consuming, therefore expensive, it is limited to prominent buildings or buildings that are particularly important for the local community. In the restoration, for example, of the Marabut, we applied tadelakt only on the lower sections of the interior walls for this very reason. But what are the findings of our project? So what did we learn from the project, from this experience, and what is next for us to think about? The complexity and close interdependency of the threats and challenges observed on site undoubtedly call for a multidisciplinary approach to any development initiative with direct involvement of the local community. The main challenge is to address people's need for better living conditions and opportunities in the oasis, which primarily means access to modern infrastructure, education, and employment. But while this is for the government to provide, because clearly it falls well beyond our remit, as researchers and practitioners, we can certainly highlight the need to integrate heritage management within the country's development policies and plans, so as not only to hold heritage laws, but also to unlock its economic and educational potential towards wider societal benefits. We can also certainly initiate other small-scale, context-specific, sustainable development trajectories designed around heritage preservation and valorization, but definitely keeping in mind the climate emergency. The need to define a scale of priorities and engage with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is clear to us. While the work I presented today mainly engaged with the SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, particularly Target 11.4, strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage, and Target 11.c, support least developed countries, including through financial and technical assistance, in building sustainable and resilient buildings utilizing local materials. Any future work in Oulad Youssef and generally in these oases will have to engage with other SDGs. More precisely with SDG 5, gender equality, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. The XAR should be provided with a water and sewage public network. This should give residents 24-hour access to tap water and sanitation within their own houses. Women would not be spending, as they currently do, 4 or 5 hours a day to fetch water from the wells, and therefore would be able to strike a balance between their domestic and productive life. They would devote more time to crafts, which anyway form an integral part of their daily routine, that which in turn would eventually empower them both socially and economically. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, promotes sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all. A women's cooperative in Oulad Youssef, which would bring the currently interested 40 women from the village, would allow them to turn their crafts into business along the lines of what has been already successfully done in the women's cooperatives created in XAR Talha and XAR Mohammed Al-Ghizlan. They could produce and sell baskets and textiles, amongst other crafts items, interact with each other as well as with visitors and outsiders, and most importantly, pass the knowledge down to the young female generation. So effectively, a women cooperative would be not only a place, a selling point, or not only a place to sell crafts items, but also a place of knowledge, of transfer and transmission of knowledge down to the next generation. Knowledge that otherwise risks. Yeah, I'm close to finishing. So this would eventually contribute to the economic self-sufficiency of this place in a way that is durable and respectful of local customs and norms. Small-scale initiatives for sustainable heritage-led tourism should also be encouraged. We generate income by promoting local culture. So, for example, family-run B&Bs, where visitors can authentically experience living in a traditional Ksar with locals before setting out on desert tours, such as, for example, Dar Nuyum in Ksar Buno, a successful such example. SDG 13, climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. We should prioritize the development of alternative solutions to prevent the desert from encroaching upon the oasis, for example, starting from existing studies on sand dunes migration patterns, such as those developed at University of Cambridge. We should also push for a return to sustainable agricultural practices, a more considerate use of natural resources, and definitely production of renewable energy. And finally, SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. Only by building trust, promoting cultural dialogue and mutual appreciation, development of skills and knowledge exchange between local, national, and international communities can we achieve the SDGs. But for now, while taking stock of what we have achieved so far and learned through this experience, we trust that at least after watching our film and reading our book, more people will be encouraged, as soon as it is safe to do so, to visit Mohammed, as helping the local community recover from the pandemic crisis. We hope that government bodies, public and private organizations will also realize the untapped oasis growth potential and support in the future sustainable heritage-led development initiatives that can reactivate the settlements by creating jobs there, which we believe is the only effective deterrent against outmigration. Thank you very much for your attention.